Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me for my new class here. I'm really psyched about it. I've been teaching the CISM since 2005, and it really hasn't changed a whole lot. I just took the latest exam a week and a half ago, and it's great because it stays at the high level. There are some changes, and we'll talk about that. But it really is. Sometimes when I try to explain cybersecurity to, I have friends who are CEOs, and they're like, yeah, but that's too. I'll have one of my guys reach down and say, I'm sick of this morning. 20 years ago, I had this discussion with a CEO of something, and I was with another person. And he was talking to the other person. He looked at me and he goes, "And Larry, and I could have one of my guys, you with your firewall stuff." And I'm just sitting there going, no, security strategy and risk management is not setting up a firewall. So CISM is built up on that. It's understanding your business. It's understanding what you do and then understanding the mission and the various things that can affect that mission. Now, risk management in general is just making sure you avoid unforeseen dangers, or mitigate any problems that these things that could happen, whether it's just a bad weather storm you didn't know. But information security touches that. And information is important to every different organization. So at an organization like whatever, Coca-Cola, they're going to have a whatever sales organization. They're going to have an HR organization. They're going to have all these, and cybersecurity touches every one of them. So it just keeps growing. It just keeps growing in its importance. Another thing that I really noticed in the test too, that's different, say, than in the CISSP. CISSP, I often feel, I mean, it's aimed toward a lot of organizations, and it's very deep in technology sometimes. But it sometimes seems like it's more military stuff. It's like those guys are trying to get into the bad. The good guys, bad guys are trying to fight. With the CISM, it was a commerce thing, like banking thing. It's just like, no, I just want to make sure that the goods weren't damaged in shipping, and that when I collaborate with, a supplier, that the supplies are still coming, they're available, and they didn't get, like I said, the supply wasn't damaged. So a lot of this, and we've certainly seen during COVID, is supply chain management. When you think about where the world's going today and crypto technologies and all these cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, which I'm a huge believer in, blockchain technologies, crypto. People tend to think it's encrypted. It keeps the money spent confidential. Not exactly. No, no, that's not really what's for. And the answer to this question, to this test, is not going to be blockchain, but blockchain is built on digital signatures. Digital signatures are to make sure that your supplier's supplies really came from that supplier and that they weren't damaged in shipping. When you get something digitally signed, it's for integrity. It's to make sure that it's authentic. It really came from Microsoft or whoever, and it wasn't infected with anything. So I find the CISM and all the ISACA things, they came up again through the insurance and through accounting, and they're just there to make sure that you can trust business, that you can trust your providers for the most part. I just listen. I'm all excited. Peter Diamandis. I don't know if you know. He's the author of originally Abundance: The Future is Better Than You Think. A lot of times we tend to put on the news and see constant negative stuff to try to get us to buy gutter helmets or whatever. But actually, if you really look at the data, I just listened this morning as I was getting ready. There's a new book out, Super Abundance. It's not by him. But he had the authors on, and they were just talking about forget dollars and cents. Let's look at how much time you have to work to whatever buy a day's worth of food. And it used to be, they were quoting someplace it was 8 hours in China in like the 60s, and it's now 1 hour. And so what really abundance means that you work less to get more resources. It's how much are you working? I don't care what financial dollars you're exchanging. So I became a big fan of Peter's, and we're the same age, two big space cadets. But he has his conference next week, and but it's a yearly conference where he gets experts from all over the world. I'm so psyched. And that's where we're going. We're trying to build a secure infrastructure to appreciate the world of abundance. So I'm not trying to get you to beat up bad guys or whatever. Now, as we come together and we trust each other, we can work together as equals. And we need to understand how the Federation works. And you did notice I'm a big Star Trek fan, and in Star Trek they have a group called the Federation. That's who the ship works for. They're not just protecting the United States or Earth or whatever. It's a federation of planets, and everybody's treated equally. And we have an organization like that. That's the ISO. And they show up on the exam a couple times, the practice exam. You don't need to memorize anything about it. Just know who they are. Yeah. That's, we'll see in some practice questions. But it's currently, oh, I got that number wrong. It's 167 member bodies. I'm sorry. Last year we added 2 member bodies. So they're there to help us work together. A lot of my risk management, a lot of the processes, standards, and stuff come from ISO 27001. If you're when you pass your CISM, you're going to be an ISO certified person, and the technologies we use are often ISO certified, common criteria. So the exam started over 20 years ago. And it was, I remember when I was doing CASSP, I was with Sean Harris at the time and Clement Dupuis and a bunch of us. And I don't know which ones are there. There was like 5 of us. And when they offered the CISM, they said, hey, if you're already a CISSP, we're going to grandfather. You just pay this extra fee. And I was like, no, I want to see the exam. I actually put it off until 2005. I took it. But it is an ISO accredited cert. It's 27001. It focuses on 4 basic domains, and we're going to see on the next slide. One of the major changes was to say that we're going to spend less time on developing the solution, the overall big strategy stuff, and spend more time on putting the program together and running the program, responding to problems. But I don't know if I found that necessarily on my test. I did get a lot of incident. You gotta be careful. What I would call business continuity. Disaster recovery is for man-made accidents and for natural disasters, but incident response is for man-made intentional. They decided to use the term incident management instead of business continuity in their description of the domain. If you work in the field and you start reading the questions, I had no problem interpreting the questions. But they make a note of it in their book that don't confuse incident management, which is the big process, which I'm calling business continuity management, with incident response. Now, IR is specifically for man-made intentional threats, typically malware. Actually, there's a person downstairs, my wife, 20 some years. She's the director of incident response at a large pharmaceutical, and she mostly deals with malware stuff and patch management. And a couple times a year, pen testers come in, they got to get ready and isolate the machines that they never were able to fix, and just walk right down that they're not allowed to test them because we never got to it. Anyway, so we'll see how these. Now they didn't change the domains. And you get 4 hours, but they changed the. Well, it's some minor. I swear I counted maybe a half a dozen questions where I saw newer terms because the test hadn't been updated since like 2015, like infrastructure as a service, software as a service, and I believe I saw agile. So that's about the only thing that really changed much. Um, Security governance, though, what we're going to be doing this morning and most of today, as my goal, we'll see, it's the first time I taught this iteration, is going to be this. All right, so that's day 1, and then we're going to do day 2, day 3 type kind of thing. And then we'll just do practice exams. But they went down, so from 24 to 17%, from 30% to 20%. It's kind of weird. I don't know that I felt that in the test because this is really the hard part. Risk management is all of this. So at a high level, we're going to see real quick. This is understanding the context of the business. What kind of company or organization, whatever is this? Enterprise is this? Is this a publicly traded company? Is this a small medical facility? What is it? And I need to know those things and understand the laws and regulations. If this is a restaurant, guess what? We're going to have to be dealing with the whatever the health inspectors are going to come in, and stuff like that. And you have to know the compliance requirements for each of these guys. Then the risk management here is probably more what they're talking about is the overall process of understanding how to identify the assets for this individual organization, value, classify, explain to them what could happen if they lose confidentiality, integrity, availability, yada, yada, yada. Do an impact and likelihood analysis, recommend the ways to prevent, detect, and respond, blah, 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 blah. And then it gets signed off. And management says, okay, we agree to, let's put that in. Let's buy these things. Let's put that in. And so that's what happens here. So here you're going to figure out exactly how to implement and continue to run. So when I buy a car and I say, okay, I'm allowed to buy the car. And I have to maintain that car. I got gas I got to put in it. I mean, there's little things that happen every day, regular maintenance, regular scheduled, oil changes. But then I could have two big man-made intentional or man-made accidents, natural disasters. So disaster recovery is like if I got in a car accident, which could have been my mistake. I wasn't paying attention or whatever, or it was an ice storm, natural disaster. That's disaster recovery. Incident response is like someone's trying to steal my car, broke into the car or whatever. So that's the last thing, and that'll be day 3. Again, with this being the first time I've gone through this iteration, we may be whatever time we have left at practice exams. So we're going to use, and that I can't record during that part because it's not my copyrighted material. So when I do my own CISSP questions, I get to record that and sell that stuff. I'm not allowed to profit off of copyrighted uh, ISACA material. There was a couple references. I'm trying to think where it was. It was very short on some, but in my research, there's a great. So if you don't know, the ISACA was started by the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations, COSO. COSO is still very active in risk management and pushing out documents like how to implement AI in security and risk management. And I put it in your folder there. So if you go to the folder and I have some recommended reading, it's fantastic, fantastic stuff. Right. Now, AI is like the new fire, and it's constantly churning. I mean, if you play with Chat GPT, it's amazing. We are crossing something really amazing right now, and it's a wonderful year. It's the most amazing year in human history, I think. We're solving a lot of problems. Some people are really worried. I'm not worried at all. I never worry that my vacuum cleaner is going to get smarter than I am and then decide that I will have to do the vacuuming. They don't have that type of intent. They make mistakes, and that's what we're here for. We're here to mitigate the mistakes of any technology, of any technical solution. But it's amazing that your data is the most valuable thing. And so we need to consider that in the test, whether we're thinking of it for real life, but it's true. But the test that you want to make sure you understand that context. It is amazing time though. I think we're right around here. I mean, this is between if you follow anything on AI, and I said this is that genie's out of the bottle. At some point, my vacuum cleaner by 2029 is going to be smarter than I am if they build them that way. Why don't stop? That's the one thing about this machine. So, but this is according to Ray Kurzweil. Ray Kurzweil wrote the Singularity is Near, very famous book on. Well, Gordon Moore was the co-founder of Intel, and you probably or may have heard. But Gordon Moore discovered in the '60s he was able to double the amount of, or his team, double the amount of transistors on a silicon wafer every 2 years. But the information processing was even faster than that because the electrons don't travel as far. So it's actually used, the number is usually about 18 months. Every 18 months, you can double the amount of processing speed. And that doesn't sound like much when something's, a million times slower than a human. That's different. When, oh, now it's 500,000. It's still really stupid. But once it's as smart as a human, and get my, that's somewhere around here. Let's say it's as smart as a human in 2029. Guess what it'll be next? Twice as smart, 4 times as smart, right? 16 times. And according to that theory, by 2045, it'll be 8 billion times smarter. It's pretty awesome. I don't worry that they're going to want to kill me. I worry about mistakes, but once we work that out, I am looking forward to just playing music after that. They say that AI will take over the 3Ds: dirty, dull, and dangerous. But don't worry, the 2Cs are for humans: compassion and creative jobs. They won't go away. I'll be your coach this week. Just real quick here. My coaches. I've been involved in martial arts since I was a little kid. A couple of my instructors, Tom Updegrove, who's the first American to pass the. He's now LPT master. I need to update that slide. License penetration testing master. He's an EC Council certified guy. And Joe Lewis passed away 12 years ago. But he was the founder of kickboxing, and neither of these guys, so I was coming up like that whole worship me. I was not to treat them as some type of special person. Tom would always say, "You're the star player, and I'm the coach trying to get you to perform to your peak. I'm not a master. You're not my slave." And that's the role I want to take on this week. I hope feel the same way. You guys are the stars, and I'm here to share some experience with you. Right? And Joe told us to respect everybody. The biggest problem with AI, how these mistakes are going to be made, are probably, let me go back to uh, the bias errors. These are the things we still have to solve. There are some things like how many strings are on my ukulele. There's 4. I don't need your opinion for that. It's a quantity of 4. Is it a good time to play right now? That depends. And if it's just my opinion, then maybe I'm going to step on other people's opinions. When you need opinion information, the more opinions you get, the better. Otherwise, you're likely to be biased. So we want everybody's opinion. And the internet allows that, right? It's a little ugly right now, but we'll get there. So, and Joe would say the same thing. Don't just protect. You're not to. We're here to protect everybody. CISSP is like a Jedi Knight, or CISM. All of my ISO certified. I've been doing computing for a long time. I've been hacking on those interwebs. Actually, we called them bulletin boards in the 80s. 300 baud modem. And I've been taking exams for a long time, so I understand how important it is to get that certificate. I get it. And at a certain point, my friends were teasing me. I was the master of multiple choice. Anyway, Moore's Law, by the way, if you're like, yep, they're running out of Moore's Law. Sort of, maybe, but whatever the case is, the point is that information doubling, according to Ray Kurzweil, didn't just happen on silicon wafers. And so wherever we are, Moore's Law was supposed to end up in 2020, but apparently it hasn't yet. We'll get there. If you're curious, Moore's Law is based on how thin you can make a conductor. There is absolutely no way to make a conductor thinner than 1 atom. So once we get to that, the point was, how thin can you make it before we get whatever quantum randomness errors and stuff like that? But we'll never get thinner than that. But there'll be something. There'll be something that replaces it. We don't know what that is. Some people think it's quantum. That what he calls the 6th paradigm. I don't know. Let's see. I'll keep my open mind about quantum. Some people get very paranoid about this. They say the Stephen Hawking guy was pretty smart, but I don't know that I agree with him on his fear of AI. Musk, I think, likes to just stir the pot. I do agree that he's right. We're going to have accidents, and they could be spectacular. And let's try. That's what our job is, to minimize those. don't want to go too far out of scope for the exam, but do consider something. How many people on Earth? Under 8 billion. How many IP addresses are there in use right now? This was in 2020. Most conversations are not human to human. When we do authentication, and there'll be some issues on there. There's a couple things with PKI that were very laughably simple. Um, but the first step in any development life cycle is to know who you're dealing with. And if you don't know who it is, how are you going to know if that supplier is authentic? But that supplier is probably not a person. It's, make sure you move them from whatever passwords to two-factor. I need an AP. I need to prove that that's Groupon. I need to know that that's really the Dropbox client talking to the Dropbox server. It's not Larry. These are where things get tricky. Our CISSP's got to get much more detail in that CCSPs, but it is something to consider here that we don't know who we're talking to sometimes. It's probably not a human. My mother, by the way, my hero of information, how I became a information security nerd. She taught me. She was very smart. Um, that most people do not tell you the truth. They tell you what they want you to think. That's how con men or whatever work. That's how malware spreads. I mean, when we talk about malware, I think there was a question on. I had to know whether it was a worm or a Trojan. It was because somebody clicked on an email. Most malware does spread through email. You know why? Because you didn't know who that email came from, and you clicked on it. But it said it was my bank. That's what they wanted you to think. She was also very good, though. I always said she could pass this exam. There's a lot of English. I went back a couple of times on my exam. You can go back. You're allowed to go back. And when you do, it's like grayed out. It's like, are you sure you want to edit this? Yeah, I'm going to edit. And then you have to click edit. But when I realized, that said the program, not the strategy, or that said reconstitute, not recover, and you got to watch those words. There's subtle differences. They could mean the difference between you got it and nope, close. And so much of it comes from shipping. So much of this was how collaboration started. Of course, yeah, I understand some colonialism started here too, but let's just look at the collaboration stuff. We were able to take goods from all over the world. I always said that if there's not enough water to go around, the mountain people and the valley people will fight for it. Yeah. But if there is enough water to go around, you might discover that the mountain people grow the best strawberries and the valley people grow the best peanut butter. And if you can just securely collaborate and make sure that that peanut butter is authentic, it wasn't damaged in shipping with blockchain or whatever digital signature technology, you can make peanut butter jelly sandwiches that never existed before. And that's what happens. We move into abundance and we can communicate more. So it's pretty cool. Now, shipping was very dangerous because no matter what you did to make sure you didn't whatever steer into anything dangerous you could see, there were dangers you couldn't see. The worst is the cliffs under the water. How you can't see that? That's why we have like radar and sonar today. But what did they have 2,000 years ago? What did they have 200 years ago? Candlelight? This took a lot. I have friends growing up that I remember when I got into computers, they were like, hey, you're doing pretty good with that, Greenie. If I got into computers, let me ask you something. Would I have to read books? Yeah, you'd have to read. Ah, that ain't for me. There are still, they said the average American man does not read a book after high school. I saw some statistic recently. It's pretty crazy. You can't steer a ship without reading. Oh, no, no. You have to have documentation. You're going to have to make a note every time you see someday. Well, first of all, let's say you want to steer from Chicago to whatever, Philly. You want to go from England to China. I can't see. I'm in Philadelphia. I can't see New York from here. I got to look at a map. I preview. Let me say before. Preview. How'd you do that? I mean, they didn't have a map. They might. It could just say, I have a goal, and you see it right through the scope. When I drive in a car, it's one thing to focus on my goal. Remember, you got to get here. Focus is when, with all the other things, I just say, yeah, but I'm just going to look at that spot. I'm just going to look right there. And the car's coming right here. Oh, maybe I got a rear view mirror. It's a good thing I do. During the trip, you have to watch where you're going. You also have to watch. You got to look all over. Dangers come from all over. Am I driving the car or did I get in a cab? Because there's really two processes here. I set the scope. I'm going to go to New York. Maybe I got in a cab. If he's watching the road, who's watching them? Oversight. Oversight. I got to be able to either somebody's continuously monitoring the road, like me, the driver, if I'm driving myself, it's a small company, or I outsourced it. I transferred the risk to some driver, but I got to watch the driver. If you get in a cab and you're just a half-hour drive, and you know that you already you knew the scope of this drive. It's supposed to be about a half hour and whatever, a $2 toll, and you look up from your Facebook and you're like, okay, it's been 3 hours. Where are we? Shame on you. You need to provide oversight. Now, before, if nothing else, you had to figure out how much time and how much money. Bottom line in business, I need to know time and quote. And they said, well, it should be about a half hour and $3. Oh yeah, let's go make sure that's what we spent. When we do these things, they don't just want to hear your words. The captain had to log this stuff. When the captain logs this stuff, captain, go out there and you're supposed to be a 6-month trip. Write down what it really was. Write down what you saw. Well, on day one, we saw some dolphins doing tricks. It's wonderful. You should have seen it. They're gorgeous. That's not important to me. You know what's important to me? Did you track how much time it took you? So we're going to talk about after when we review. Can't look at everything. We're getting better at it, and big data and stuff and AI. But for the most part, we're going to say no, no, no. I can only monitor certain critical to quality metrics, and we'll talk about that. But that's governance, and you can't do it without reading. So it takes reading and writing to be able to manage this ship and govern a ship. And you might have wrote down, hey, there's some cliffs and rocks over here. Make sure we don't hit that. You updated it in words and pictures, right? You created a map and you wrote it down. And you notice, when we're doing this during a full moon, we don't hit the rocks. It only seemed to happen, or a new moon, when we have a whatever first quarter. It's weird. Avoiding the rocks, avoiding risk management isn't just writing down known risks that are statically there. It's realizing weird patterns that might not be obvious as to why. I don't know when they were able to explain why the moon created tides and stuff like that, but they certainly knew that it did for at least 3,000 years. Pretty cool. They were predictable. You know what's not predictable? When a windstorm comes out of nowhere. One of the most important things we need to do to govern anything is to keep up-to-date information on where the weather is, what's going on with the weather. One of the earliest uses of electronic communication was by the shipping industry to know weather reports, right? When the radio came out, it was in 1909 that Marconi patented anyway. People were using radio before that, but when radio was patented in 1909, it was still very, very new. It was not, necessarily used on ships, but there was like the Tesla of ships out there, the Titanic, and everybody seems to know that the Titanic had a horrible disaster. It turns out it wasn't unsinkable as they thought. But what few people seem to grasp is that There were 25 or so hundred people in there, and 700 of them lived because they had a radio. They never would have lived without a radio. And after that, Lloyd's of London and the United States, it was a law in the United States, the Radio Act of 1912. From now on, all ships will carry radios. We need to know this up to date all the time. These are risks, things that you can't predict, can't see ahead of time. It's the cliffs under the wall. I mentioned we're going to discuss this a few times. The Enterprise, which happens to be the name of the ship on Star Trek, if you're not familiar, is used a lot in your book. It's Enterprise Risk Management, stuff like that. Now, Enterprise and organization are sometimes used interchangeably. In fact, it's common knowledge, I'll say, that an enterprise is an organization. It's the top level. Department of Commerce, which not only say the Department of Commerce has whatever an HR function and whatever engineering, but they also own other high-level enterprise. The Department of whatever I don't know, motor vehicles or something. Might be under that. So these organizations get very, very complex, and one of the hardest things is that especially in cybersecurity, we see it taking tests. People use different words to describe the same thing. According to the NIST right here, this is my favorite document now, and it has two appendices. They're both in your folder there under the suggested reading, 8286, 8286A, and 8286B. And they're all from the last couple of years, and they stress how we need to use a common terminology, particularly in reporting risk. At the top level, you're going to have a chief risk officer, and that term showed up on my exam. I don't remember that ever showing up on an exam for me. Maybe I just forgot it. Take a test with 150 questions, walk out of there. How many do you remember? 2. So I'm not saying I didn't get it, but it's pretty cool. Now, the chief risk officer is a term from banking used to describe, let me put it up here, the CRO is all kinds of risk, and it's much of it is compliance. Compliance, and we'll say, and financial risk. Risk. Now, because information touches everything, everybody's going to report to this guy, but they're going to maintain. It was much bigger on my C risk than it was here, but just in case. They're going to maintain a list of all known risks, the risk register, and then they're going to identify where the company is in relationship to these risks, and that's the risk profile. These terms will be very important. Yeah, it all started with the shipping, and it all started with collaboration. Actually, it's kind of a technology thing. Technology led it. When the Portuguese developed this technically advanced sail, having a sail like this changed everything. All of a sudden, you didn't need the wind at your back. You could sail in other winds. Pretty sweet. Changed up. Now we have the first wide area networks. Now they're taking ships to all new lands, discover the new world, And one of the things they discovered in the Americas was sugar. For the Europeans, and they discovered caffeine-related drinks in the Orient stuff, and in Asia, and particularly tea in China was a favorite of Catherine Granza, and she liked to mix it with sugar. You never had that before. That was a brand new thing, man. It swept Europe in a couple hundred, because her husband was King Charles II of England, and everybody needed to have tea and sugar. And these dudes at the Lloyd's Coffee House were getting really strong caffeine from Turkey. Were getting really wired up on caffeine. Dude, I got an awesome idea. They actually copied something from the Dutch. Instead of one guy investing all his money in his fortune in the ship, and if the ship goes down, he lost all his fortune. How about if 100 of us invested 100 ships, and we'll share the And that's really the birth of the stock market. The Dutch started that, but then the Brits who jumped right on it. Lloyd's is still here today. They are still leading the way with risk management and these things, and they lead it in cybersecurity. They were the first to offer cyber. They were the first to offer it in spaceships. Now, today it's insurance. The insurance industry, and you'll need to know on your exam, there's two basic types. We have the natural disasters or man-made accidents, right? We're going to call that indemnity insurance for accidents. And I'll just say for DR. It's not exactly true, but for DR, we're going to call it indemnity. Insurance, and that'll indemnify and damage me. Oh, it was an accident. I didn't mean it. Okay. But what if you have an employee who works for you and that infidel is stealing? It's a man-made intentional thing. And so for IR, we're going to say we're at fidelity. And we'll talk more about that, what the differences are. Lloyd's Bank, I think you know what a bank does. They'll lend you money, but you got to prove to them that, certain thing. If you want to lend you money, well, I should not do that. So I can get insurance, but why did they insure you? Well, for one, you got to go through three basic compliance checks before they'll do anything. They're going to insure this ship and you and your crew to go on pick up this tea from China. You want to take them because they were basically like FedEx and UPS, jobs. Well, they said, let's make sure the ship is ready. Is the ship in ship shape? That's the same today as 27001. That is your organization in ship shape. Is the staff? Well, that's what you're doing here. That's at the CISP, but this is 17024. These are ISO certs from Federation. And then is the technology, is the sale, is the tech? Well, that's the common criteria. You don't need to know these numbers, not for this test, even though it's in the book. And that's 1.5. So it's still the same thing. Now, when you take your exam to make sure that the staff are ready to be accredited for the mission, your staff has to get a certificate. The certification came from the ISACA, but that's not who did the validation. That was that PSI group, that self-proctor that I had a hard time with, the validator. So this is like taking your exam through PSI. This is getting your certificate, and this is getting a job or a mission. And it's still how it's done today. And it's for secure collaboration, so we can mix tea and sugar or peanut butter and jelly or whatever. And yeah, they're still doing, and they are an ISO registrar. They'll do that for the Federation. Our overall goals, and somebody's been writing. Can you guys send a reminder of the reading material? It's no, I'm not worried about Skynet taking over. No, I'm going to combine these two. Martine, remind me. I'm going to put the C risk under the CISSP or CISM. Actually, I'm going to create a high-level GRC, and you're going to get access to both. In the CISM, I have it right now as the suggested reading. So we're going to go over it. In fact, where's the one that's from? This is from Lloyd's itself. It's pretty cool. Risk appetite and approved tolerance. Yeah, I was reading it. So it's pretty cool. These are great things. And this is a relatively short one. It's just 23 pages. Lloyd's minimum standards for risk management. So if you purchase the thing, you'll have access. Everybody who purchased it. I know some people from Certification Station, we invited you to sit here, but I do have to explain to my wife downstairs that I am working, and I do that by getting some of you to buy stuff. So when you buy it, you're going to get all this stuff that's in here. That includes the suggested reading. And then you'll also get the C-risk stuff, and I'll make sure that happens. All right, but so overall, we always think of, let's make sure we get there on time. Let's make sure we don't waste time or money getting from whatever England to China, pick up the tea, upload gold, download tea. Um, that's the goal. I'd like to get there instantly. I mean, really. Hey, you're flying to England? How long would you like it to take? No time? Well, that's impossible, Larry. Huh. There was a question like that. There was a question where I realized that the recovery time objective, someone said we would like data to be restored within an hour. You realize and you looked at, dude, you can't restore that much data within an hour. It's just not possible. So you needed to adjust. You needed to tell people realistically, I'm sorry, the next plane's not till, So the CEO would love to, let's say, in the board of directors, CEO and board of directors. The CEO represents the board. They're kind of a weird position, and they point to it in this exam. The CEO is part governance and part senior management. They're the board says, "Hey, would you talk to the CFO, the COO?" So the COO wants to get there in time. The CFO, oops, the CFO wants to make sure you don't waste money. Do you know when they first sent these ships out? Like the first group of ships from the Dutch, I believe, from the Dutch East India Tea Company, sent out like 100 ships, and I think 30 of them made it back. Ew. What happened to the? What about people? So that's why we have the CRO now. It's not a common position all over. It appears to be, in my experience, very common in financial institutions, and it's becoming more common with cybersecurity. But it's not a lot. I last night I didn't save it. I saw a graph. Who does the CISO report to? And it was like still about 70% of it is a technical. They report to probably the CIO. They might report to a COO, but some of them reported to a CRO, like less than 5%. Yeah. Okay, if anyone's taking my other classes, my CISSP, I generally only focus on 5 steps, but there are really the first step that I've lumped together for this exam is better separated. So um, the first step is the governance stuff, understanding the context. And I said all development life cycles should start with who. Because if you get that wrong, it doesn't really matter. Right? If you deliver the food to the wrong guy, what is it? What are we talking about here? We're a healthcare organization. You're expanding business. When are you going to be doing into that? Oh, wow. And you're going into what? Okay, why are you doing that? So that's going to be separate. And these are the governance issues. I don't know why Zoom would think I didn't want to keep that there. But anyway, these are the governance issues. This is sometimes called project initiation, planning, whatever. And they lowered the requirements to understand this, but this is generally when you know your role, your level of authority. And CISM exams will make sure you know you have very little authority. So a CISM is primarily this guy. Your job is to first you're going to have it. Why are we going to this restaurant? Say it's a company party. Oh, well, that's why. Who gets to go? When is the party? What? But there'll also be how much are you allowed to spend? Budgets. So if a CISM is kind of like put it in a small company, then they could do it. But you might have multiple CISOs, and then the CISM or C risks or whatever. The CISM is their manager. Go back, go back. So we'll figure that out more later. Analysis is when you do the risk assessment. We will also do that today. And that's when you do let me explain the menu to you. Or they'll say, hey, what kind of vegetables do you have? What kind of green vegetables? And then they'll explain. and they'll start, and that's also the risk assessment, the deeper, exactly what do you want in business continuity planning. This is the BIA. If you've done any information security, you know that the BIA is the hardest part of business continuity planning. That's because in general, analysis is the hardest part. People often don't know what they want when they get to a restaurant. They'll look over that menu for a while. And then that same person, once based on knowing what they did, they design a solution. So this is kind of really where we start our focus, because I would say that the program starts with the plan, and then you implement the plan. We will test the plan. There's a number of questions, very simple questions on disaster recovery. Cold site, warm site, hot site. That's it. And reciprocal agreement, mutual aid. No, I think they call it reciprocal. And then we have to day-to-day operate it. And this is where we have our incident management, and especially when, and again, I have small problems. Like I have to change the oil on my car. I've got a scheduled maintenance just popped up. But much bigger is the big problem. So we'll cover this on day 3. Do make sure you read everything right. That's the hardest part. Waiters they could know everything on that menu. They listened to the guy right, and they wrote down the wrong thing. Oh, I don't know why I wrote down you were having a Diet Coke. For some reason, I knew you said, tea, and yet I wrote down Diet Coke. What's wrong with me? I do that all the time. So please reread everything. Make sure you're answering the actual question. Basic concept in information science to me, and most people miss something, and my mom would have known it. So you have things that you know. There are the things that you know. Let's say I have a chest of drawers here, and I have one that says shirts. Next one says private. There's a lock on it, and this one says whatever, pants. And actually, there's a hidden panel in the back. Drawer. I don't know. Isn't that how you spell drawer? Hidden panel. I'm calling a panel. All right. So there's a hidden panel in the back. We didn't know about that. Well, I open up the shirts drawer and I see shirts. Yeah. I had information about that. I try to open the locked door. I don't have the key to it, and it says, what's in there? I don't know. Something, I don't know what's in there. I know there's something in there. The hidden panel, I had no idea that was there. I didn't know. And that's where most people end you with. It's the things you didn't know that you didn't know, Monsieur. No. I mean, they might, I'm sure. But most of the time, that's not. Because when you do learn something, I didn't know that. And you adapt quickly. But when you think you know something and it turns out you're wrong, you will often dogma. I refuse to accept that you're right and I'm wrong. That's when the shirt that I was looking for was in the pants drawer, and I didn't even look there because it said pants. I was misinformed. And that's how malware spreads. That's what they want you to think. Attacks on information basically fall into 2 categories. It's either you're just listening when you shouldn't be, or the people hear stuff, data leakage, whatever. Hey, it got out. You can't tell if somebody's listening to you. I think that guy's paying. Is he listening? No, he's just reading. I think he's listening. But you could have done it in a safer area. You could have encrypted the data. You could have soundproofed the room. Passive attacks are preventable, even though you can't necessarily tell when they're happening. They're undetectable. When somebody injects malware into your system, somebody did a ransomware attack, there were like 3. Oh, that was probably another newer term that you didn't see before. Yeah, I probably got like three questions that mentioned ransomware. But that's when they're sending something. Now, I can certainly tell if somebody keeps calling me on the phone. I can't always stop it. I might on this test have two phones. Why would an organization, there was a fault tolerance or something, or countermeasure for denial of service attacks was basically load balancing it, something like that. In insurance, Lloyd's of London have been telling us for years, you cannot prevent fraud. If I give the parking lot attendant the keys to my car, then prevention's out of the thing. When we talk about accepting a risk, it basically means I accept I can't prevent it. I can't prevent all fires in here. But if you don't have smoke detectors, you're now negligent. We'll beat that up a lot this week. Where are we going? I am very optimistic. I think we are going to space. I've been a space cadet since I was a little kid. When I saw pictures I'm 62 this year. When I grew up in the 60s, and I'd see pictures of you know, Jupiter and I don't know if we knew about the four big moons of those days, and I was like, I'm going to go there. And I still want to. It's not just fans. So, and I'm not the only one. Jeff Bezos, who I think is my age too, is trying to build. Actually, I got a lot of these drawings are from artists that wrote for the book. Whoops, for Jared O'Neill about. Jared O'Neill thinks that the most logical place for us to go is to move to space, and we could take our high tech lifestyle there. It's not safe on Earth, and it is 60s, or excuse me, 70s. One of his students was Jeff Bezos. So while I'm fascinated, I was like 19 when I read the book. It came out in 77 or something. Uh, Jeff Bezos was like, "Yeah, I'm going to do it." He was in his class. All right, so it is a very much an English test. You got to read very, very carefully. Make sure you watch. There's a lot of process stuff. It's almost all process, honestly. It's all about knowing what step in the life cycle comes next. Right? It's whether it's a development life cycle, an incident response, a business continuity planning. What would you do that next? Who's the person you would go to? And make sure you're answering that right question. Again, this is a loosely my idea, so I'm hoping today my overall goal is to just cover the big picture, the strategy and the risk management process, and then tomorrow we're going to work on the actual program. That now that I know what you need, and I basically do that with controls. We're going to look at the control categories from NIST 853 or something. We'll just look at ways to prevent, detect, and respond to controls. And then on day three, we focus a lot more on business continuity, disaster recovery, and incident management and stuff. And we'll have plenty of time to do practice exams throughout this whole thing. So I don't know how many hours I can actually record this week. Now, normally my goal for this class, because it's a combined class, is that on day four, I would do a CISM practice exam. And it's the ISACAs, and I can't record it. But because this is a special CISM focus, normally I do a C risk next, but I we'll see where we are. See what it happens on. I just know day 5 is green, and isn't that nice? Because anybody know what also happens on day 5? If I gave you a tip, it's green. My goodness, are you just not by your? It's St. Patrick's Day then. Tomorrow is Einstein's birthday. All right, let me pause the recording. That's our intro.